overview, unless you want me to. So my name's Elisa Campbell, State Representative for House District 56. And put together this kind of just get to know your government better. This is the third session. So we started with just a overview of how things work. And last week had a few of our mayors here to talk about how the city operates and functions. And so tonight we'll dive deeper into how the county operates and functions. And then the last one, September 11th, that fourth night, will primarily be the state. So how the state functions and how we pass legislation and that whole process. And then at the end of that night, we'll have all of these guys come back and we'll do a panel discussion that has all of the city, county, and state. Are you here for that one? Maybe? No, we'll figure it out. So what's really, really cool, and this is how exceptional, what I love about Wyoming, and Casper and Natrona County, and maybe, I don't know, we all work really well together. So as the mayors were talking about, I mean, all of our mayors get together and have breakfast with our city, our county commissioners once a month? Once a month, city and county, but we all know each other and work together really well. So when I have crazy ideas and say, hey Dave, I'm gonna need you to be, they actually, show up and help me out, which I'm really grateful for. So the really cool thing though, we have with us chair of our county commissioners, so the kind of president of the board, so to speak. Yeah, our chairman, Dave North, and then our county clerk, Tracy Good. And she will tell you how many of our state statutes were written just for her. County clerk. And then we have our county court clerk. Did I get that right? District court clerk.
Yeah.
There's Jill Keister is here with us. So Jill and Tracy, so very grateful. They weren't sure they were going to be in town, and then they were, and they are here. So. Because they don't have enough to do. So, Jill and Tracy and Dave. So I'm gonna hand it off mostly to Dave, and then I'm gonna jump in on occasion. And one of our other county commissioners, Casey Coates, will be here shortly.
Yep.
Yeah? Cool.
Yes.
Okay. So now I'm gonna get out of the way and let Dave do magical things.
How many of you guys know what the county actually does?
Well, we're here.
That's a good answer. The county commissioners are the lowest elected officials that have to go by your party representative. We are the ones that are closest to the people. So we actually have to deal with everything in the county, not just stuff out in the county, but stuff in the cities and everything else. So there's a lot of stuff there's a lot of overlap as far as that goes. So the different branches and the way we do things, that's part of the reason why we have our breakfasts once a month, so we can talk about things, and so we can go through and make sure that we're on the same page. But we all have different meetings. One thing, every one of that I know of, every one of the cities have their meetings on Tuesday nights, which is the same time we do, which sometimes runs into a problem because you want to go to one, you can't go to the other all the time. And if there's something we need to talk about, then we have to make arrangements to be there when we're not having our meetings. But there is that very cohesive community between us. We don't always agree on everything, but we do communicate with each other so that we're better informed of what the needs are in the cities as well as in the county.
Commissioner Coates.
Yes, this is Casey Coates. He's our newest commissioner. But he also works for the city of Mills. And so he's intimately involved with the interactions of the city as well as the county. So these are basically the statutes. It's kind of interesting that the numbers are so low that you only have to have 300 qualified electors, to start becoming a county. That was written a long time ago, obviously, and it's never been updated.
Well, I think if you guys remember, I don't know if you remember, because we talked about state statutes pertaining to the cities. In order to become an incorporated municipality, you have to have 200 of your closest friends, right? So you get 200 of your closest friends together, you can become a city. You bring in 100 more, well, now you can be county.
Yeah. Be a city, it's easier. You don't have all the things that you have to deal with, because there's 5 elected county commissioners, but then there's also, we also, unlike the cities, we have elected officials like Tracy and Jill, the sheriff, coroner,
Assessor.
then the assessor, and the treasurer. They all have their own individual sections that they have to deal with that the commissioners don't oversee. We regulate their budget, they have to come to us for their budget, but other than that, we don't have any authority over them. The city is different, because depending on how your city's set up, they're all underneath the mayor or underneath the council or the city administrator. So that's a big difference. That's a challenge in certain ways, because we all have to work together, but we all have to work together for the good of the county. And that's one thing that each elected official, including the commissioners, we all have certain pet projects that we like, or that we would like to see get done. But that doesn't always mean that there's enough money to go around to get that done. And so that's something that we have to work together, so that we make sure as the commissioners that that budget reflects that. So that's a little bit different. So, but anyway.
This is probably the first state statute though, because in terms of the cities getting established, it really is just based on, population and needs. The idea of how much the total property is worth, or the value of the property, doesn't come into play until we start talking about counties. That's where property valuation comes in. You can't have, you have to have at least $7 million in terms of taxable property within a county.
Anymore, that's not very much.
No, it's not very much, but it's an
A
interesting
neighborhood or two.
addition. Yeah, it's an interesting addition in terms of state statutes, because cities, your towns, your cities, there is no reference to the amount of taxable property that is there, but there is with counties. Yep. I think we probably exceed 9 million.
Okay. Political subdivisions, we are a political subdivision, and so are the cities, and basically anybody that's elected like that is a political subdivision within the state, and we have to follow all the rules that are established by the state statutes. We can't deviate from those. Our county attorney helps us stay in line. These ladies over here help us stay in line. We all have to work together to make sure that we don't step out of line as far as what we're doing. And so the county commissioners conduct state business. We are a part of the executive branch. We're a lower level. We're at the bottom. We're the closest to the people. And if you look at it, the only people in the state that get more people to vote for them, or have more people vote for them than the county commissioners or the county elected officials, are the state elected officials.
Your top 5.
Yeah, so all of our state representatives and everything else, most of them only have a small portion. And that's one of the questions that a lot of people ask is what district you're in. I don't know if I'm in your district. I don't know if you can vote for. I can vote for you. Well, county commissioners don't have a district. Our district is the entire county. So we are responsible for everybody in the county, not just one portion of it. And that's one of the big differences between the legislators and the local county electeds. All the county elected officials are responsible for the entire county.
What's the county population right now?
About 88,000, somewhere in that Yeah,
Yeah.
so,
So, and even when we talk about, so our county commissioners, there's 5 of them, right? Those 5 then have to, I mean, maintain relationships with every town and city within Natrona County. And our, how many representatives do we have between the Senate side and the House side? Well, we've got at least 8 in the House. And then
lot,
another,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
There's a lot, right? There's a lot of us. So we have these 5 people that have to do all of that because they are countywide. Yeah, my district is very little.
And one thing that's not on here that's kind of different, and a lot of people don't really understand it, is and this is a responsibility of this legislature to the county commissioners, is tax appeals. We operate also, the county commissioners also operate as the board of equalization for the county. So when you do a tax appeal, it actually comes to us first. The problem that I have with a lot of that is that we're very restricted as far as what the statute allows us to do and what we can and can't do, which is very frustrating because if we disagree with where your house has been allocated to as far as what the district is or what the association is, we can't do anything about that. We can discuss it, but bottom line is that's up to the assessor. That's part of their responsibility. They are the ones that establish what the value of the property is, where it is, and everything else. When it comes before the commissioners or the BOE, the only thing we can really do, according to state statute, is look for deficiencies. Look for where it wasn't fair and equitable about how they did things. And that's frustrating. That's frustrating for us, and it's also frustrating for the property owners and the citizens. But that's one of the most difficult things.
Commissioner Lord, I have a question. Natrona County has 5 commissioners.
Yes.
So each of them represent the 5 cities or?
No, we represent the entire county. We don't represent one or the other. We are elected county-wide. We represent the entire county.
What's the rationale behind having just 5?
Some of that's set up by state statute.
It
You have to
is.
have at least 3.
Yeah.
And you can have no more than
7.
7.
5 is enough.
And so, I mean,
won't go into
that,
that
so,
really, but 5 is enough.
so state statute gives them, each county, a little bit of flexibility. You have to have at least 3.
Yeah.
You have to. And you can have no more than 7.
Yeah, and-
So some of it depends on population. What
Yeah.
would happen if we decided we wanted 6? How does that process work?
That's not good.
That's not good.
It's well, for one thing, it needs to be an odd number.
Oh, that's
It's gotta
true.
be an
We have to
odd
go to
number
7.
because
We'd
if you
have
don't
to
have
go
an
7.
odd number, you have to have somebody that can break a tie.
I'm wondering if you would just state the names of all the cities and towns in the county that you guys are responsible for. I don't think everybody understands that it's not just Natrona County here.
Edgerton, Midwest, Bar None, Evansville, Mills, and Casper cities. But then you also have Alcova, but Alcova is unincorporated. I mean, it doesn't have the same, it's not as an incorporated city. So they don't do things quite the same way. They can work on everything out there, but it's not quite the same. So those are the ones, but we go all the way out. The Lysite, and, Powder River, I mean, basically we cover the entire
The entire county.
county. And a lot of those are not, they may have a town name, that doesn't really mean anything if they don't have the personnel, they don't have the people to incorporate as a town, then that's where a lot of that slows down. Natrona is a big, that's another one, it's this side, but they're not really towns, they're on the map, but, and they're important to us. That's one thing that I don't want to leave anybody out because they are all important to us. Ormenos is another one. So, and Highland. Did I miss any?
You have to go back to the city notes and then pull up, you know, statutorily, what process you have to go through to become an incorporated municipality. So, Alcoa has not yet. What's interesting, and I'll show you a map here in just a minute, because we do have 23 counties, right? What people don't know is that the numbering system, when they went through and numbered counties, was in 1930. And it was based on the value of the property at that time. So in 1930, the value of the property within Natrona County was number 1. We were higher than anybody else. That is not the case anymore.
No.
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 We're still number one.
We're still number 1. We just aren't worth as much as some of the other
But not for the
counties.
same reason.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so there they are. There's all 23.
We also share legislative district, legislative district with Commerce County. So we even have that overflow as well.
Yeah, we
And
have
and
one
that's-
representative that is Converse.
Yeah, and that's new.
Natrona.
Yeah.
That's
That
new.
happened with redistricting.
Yeah. Because the redistricting is based off your population size in certain areas, and that's one of the things that Tracy works very diligently on making sure that all the districts are the same or as close as possible. And I'm glad that's her job and not mine. Because there's a lot to be said about that, and I know there was a lot of people that didn't like the boundaries, they didn't like what it was, they were fighting about that last time around because they wanted to make sure that they had the people that supported them in their districts. And there were some of them that didn't get quite everything they wanted, but the other thing they try to do is not, when you redistrict, is not change the district so that you're pushed out of the area that you're elected in. You know, that's something that Tracy worked very hard to work on that, to make sure that was the case, so.
One of the things, then I'll get your question, as you look at this, because not only are the counties outlined, right, based on property value, and then they're numbered, but the county seat is all dictated by statute. So it will say for the county of Washakie, the county seat is Worland. So those are all the county seats identified by state statute. Casper is the county seat for Natrona County, which is kind of cool. People don't know that.
Is the redistricting thing per the county in Wyoming? Or, because obviously in the news, it's a little different everywhere else. So how does that work in Wyoming?
So it's done every 10 years with the census, and each county submits their own plans and based, you know, their own requirements. Based, it's a formula based, and there's a threshold that certain districts have to meet. It can't be above or below this threshold. So it's up to the clerk to draw those lines, propose them to the legislative body, and then the legislatures are the ones who have the final authority on approving those lines. So that's how it works. So it's an every 10-year process. So each county submits their own plans.
Because some counties will grow
Yeah,
more than others.
and I don't know if everybody in here is aware of it or not, but Trump's actually talking about a 5-year census.
I will quit my job.
You can't even get enough workers to get a 10-year.
Huh?
You can't even get enough workers to do a 10-year census.
There's no way you're gonna do 5.
Yeah, and so I'm just saying that is something that, not because of Wyoming, but because of other places and the way they counted and who they counted, that's what they're looking at. And that is out of our control, all of our control. So I don't think it's gonna change, if anything happens, I don't think it's gonna change anything in Wyoming. But there are other places that it may. And that's the tricky part about being an elected official, is not only do we have to watch what comes out of the legislature, out of Cheyenne every year, and be familiar with those laws, but we also have to be familiar with what comes out of Washington DC, and if and how that's going to affect us. And so that is something that we have to be educated on that.
A question, how often do you interface with DC? Or
How often do I what?
interface with federal.
As little as possible. Actually, I know all of our representatives, senators and representatives, they all know me. If there's something that we need to, and there's a lot of us that are the same way. I'm not special as far as that goes. Wyoming is just a big town. That's really all it amounts to. We're just spread out a whole lot further than everybody else. And so our senators and our representative, I have seen that they are very receptive to us reaching out to them and talking to them about things. They ask us about what's important, what's going on, and they take our input. The other thing that works really well is that we have associations. The treasurers have one, the clerks have theirs, the coroners have one, the sheriff has one, county commissioners have one. They take the information that we have from all of the counties, and then they pass that information on. They go to DC annually, not only to work with our representatives, but also to work with the federal administration as far as things that are important to us, things that we need to have done, whether it's mining operations, oil and gas, timber, endangered species. There's all kinds of things that they talk about when they go back there. And that helps us out. And we have direct contact with all our associations, and they listen to us. And that's one thing that is good. So, it really, our associations do a lot more than what people realize they do for us.
The associations, I got a chance to meet Jeremiah, I think.
Jeremiah, Reamer?
Yes,
Yep.
Yeah.
last week at the Department of Revenue Legislation.
Yeah.
And is he elected or is he nominated or
No, he is hired.
by?
The Wyoming
Yes.
County Commissioners Association.
They're a separate 501.
Yep. So he's actually hired, by our association. Each one of the associations, I believe, have somebody that represents them
Yeah,
like that.
they have an
No,
executive.
no.
we do not.
You guys don't?
Okay.
No.
Yeah.
So that is one thing, but, it's not just our funding that supports him, it's outside funding that groups actually support that as far as what they're doing. So it's not just the money that comes from our dues. But one of the things that they do, and it really helped, and this year it made a huge difference. Well, it always does, but the County Commissioners Association, they put together a revenue estimate. And I can honestly tell you that it was right on the money this year. It helps us figure out just exactly what our projected revenue is, because we have to have a balanced budget by statute. So we can't spend more money than we have coming in. And that is something that really helps as far as that goes. It makes a big difference. Being able to sit down and kind of calculate a lot of that stuff and look at it helps us out a whole lot, knowing if we're gonna have to cut things or if we can put money into different things. So that part does help. So, okay.
Talked a little bit about this, so at the top in the yellow, that's for your reference, where you can find this information in state statute. How our counties operate and function, how our cities and towns operate and function, it's by state statute. So Title 18 really is where you'll find most of county.
And the district court clerk is in the Wyoming Constitution. That was, I don't know if you're gonna touch on that.
I didn't, so you
No.
should do that.
It was established in 1889, so the authors of the Wyoming State Constitution, they made the 23 jurisdictions or territories, and at that time they said, every single court will have a clerk who will be elected, because they wanted neutrality between the court and the people and the record. So, and that's still the way it is today. So,
I did not know
yeah,
that.
that's kind of interesting.
You're in our constitution.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And the county attorney, there's two different types in this state. There's an elected county attorney and there's an appointed county attorney. Natrona County's is an appointed county attorney. If they're an elected county attorney, then they're also the county prosecutor. We have a different position for that, and that's,
The
yeah,
district
our
attorney.
DA.
District
So-
Which
attorney.
is an elected position.
Yeah,
Right.
it's an elected position. We don't have, I can honestly say, we don't have a whole lot of interaction with them.
I do.
I see you do.
The commissioners don't have a whole lot of interaction because it's totally, it's a different setup as far as the state goes and how they get their money. But
Well, they're judicial.
our county attorney, because she is appointed, actually answers to the commission.
Much like the city, right, with the city of Casper. So the city of Casper has our city council, and our city council hires, manages, terminates our city manager, our city attorney, and then our municipal judges. So it's kind of the same way at the county. The county is the one that appoints and hires and fires, yeah, the attorney.
So, and that actually is a position that, once it's appointed, they're appointed for a year. We have to renew that on an annual basis. That's according to state statute also.
So those are the rest of your electeds. I'm pretty sure.
Can you tell us how long those terms are for?
4 years,
4 years.
yeah. Lita won't be up because she's appointed
Yeah, she's.
by us. Everyone on this list, except for Casey and I, will be up for election next year if they choose to run. We're the oddballs in the group. We're on the odd year. So, but everybody else will be up for re-election.
Yeah, they don't want your entire board of county commissioners turning over at the same time, so, yeah, our vice chair, Dallas, Jim, and Peter will either have to decide to run or not, but they'll be up in 26.
But you're stuck with Casey and I.
Another 3 years.
So, yeah.
So Tracy, you're
If
up.
something
I'm
goes
sorry.
wrong, blame Casey, it's his
Yeah.
fault.
So you guys are both every 4 years?
Yes.
But how long have you been our county clerk?
This is my second term, but
Okay.
I've been with the clerk's office for 33 years.
Wow.
And
So
I have
when
to-
you see Tracy Good, say yes. She does good work. Does good work.
And I've been with the county this August for 39 years. And
Started
I-
when she was 3.
Yes, and this is my first term as the clerk.
And I'm not sure, how long has Tom been with us? A
Same
long
as,
time.
Treasurer.
same as I have. He was elected in 91, I believe.
Okay, so he's been like.
Our treasurer.
So we
he's been
love the
treasurer
county.
for it.
Yes. But that's what's challenging though, and we've talked about this at the city, level, when you see names on ballots, you don't know who they are. And sometimes we end up electing people that don't have the knowledge and understanding, or we end up, not electing, and we lose a lot of that institutional knowledge and experience, and it gets really tricky then, because you've got somebody coming in that a lot of our state statutes refer to our county clerk. And so it's really, really, really important job to know who does it and how well they do it. So just keep electing these guys.
Well, thank you.
Keep going. Okay. Some of the boards and commissions.
I'm
You
gonna
can
let
talk about-
Casey
Casey can talk about those.
this. It's his turn to talk a little bit.
Sure.
Just
No
take
problem.
one of the other mics, Casey.
I'll just talk loud, if that works.
As long as the online people,
They're all online?
Online
Okay,
too.
sorry. That's okay.
It's kinda like ours.
and we're gonna record it. So you can show it at your kid's birthday party.
Okay, so boards and commission, the list is here. Some of these boards, we have more interaction with than others. The Amica Reuse Joint Powers Board, this has to do with the Three Crowns Golf Course area. There's Board of Trustees for the Parks and Recreation System.
Just hold it.
That's new.
Maybe.
Maybe.
There,
Yeah,
it's trying.
It's trying.
So that is new, newly established. It's consists of 3 commissioners right now and 2 other appointees that the commission appoints. We also have the Fair Board, which is, everyone on there is appointed to the commission. It's an application process. If you want to be on these boards, you apply, and then we do interviews and make selections based on who we feel would best represent those boards and the people that they serve. Community Juvenile Services Joint Powers Board. Detention Facility Joint Powers Board, Hall of Justice Joint Powers Board. These all have to do with some criminal justice aspects of our community, how we're dealing with our juveniles in need of additional services, how we house the people that our sheriff has in detention, and then the Hall of Justice is exactly as it sounds, where some of our courts
Doesn't like you.
it does not like me. Where some of the courts and the police department right now is housed. Memorial Hospital Board of Trustees, this was a board that previously through Lemming Medical Center helped with indigent care and some of the involuntary holds. Right now it's not exactly active because we have the Banner and Collective Health Trust interplay, but it could have more to do in the future. And the Turner County Library Board, that is the governing board for the library. They appoint a director, and we essentially provide budget for them. The Parks Advisory Board is no longer, and the Planning and Zoning Commission, that is another appointed board that reviews planning, subdivision, pretty much any kind of urban development for the county. It comes to the PNC board first. They make a recommendation based on the regulations that we have, their understanding of them, and we can affirm or deny their recommendation. And then the Predator Management District, this is a board that the state mandates that we fill, and that's pretty much it with the boards. They're fairly self-explanatory. If you want to be on a board, apply. We'd be happy to have you.
Now, when you go to the county's website, just the Natrona County website, there's a list of all of the boards, all of the commissions, all of the committees. Are there committees too?
You might say something about
Yeah.
the health department.
Sure, there is a health department board. There's also, we also do appoint 2 members to the Collective Health Trust Board, which oversees the post-closing agreement with Banner.
And a lot of these, so when you go to the website for Natrona County and just look up boards and commissions, all of them, you can apply for any of them. And so you submit an application to the county and then are interviewed, and then our 5 commissioners decide and start appointing people. Pretty easy to do. Yeah.
How many people are on these boards usually, and about how long do they serve? Or kind of what does that turnover look like?
So a lot of the boards have a 5-year term. The boards are typically 5-member boards. Some of the boards that we appoint to are larger boards, but we only have maybe 2 appointees to them. A lot of the boards have a 2-term limit, and then you must be off for a period of time before you can reapply for the board.
So the ones on the bottom, I literally just pulled that off a couple of days ago in terms of vacancies. I don't know if it's still accurate with the Parks and Rec and Planning and Development Board of Appeals.
No, we
No?
don't have any.
Okay. So never mind, those aren't vacancies.
But you can put your application in, and if we do have a position that's available, it's like we just filled a position on the weed and pest, at our last meeting, and we only have 1 applicant on there. And so, just because there's not currently a position open, doesn't mean you can't put your name in there. And then if we do have something that opens up to.
I would pick a board, pick a, something that you have an interest in, or maybe experience or background in, that would be useful, especially, just as a way to serve our county. Yeah, bring some of that knowledge and experience in.
So the health department is part of this, we just don't see it?
That's correct.
So most of these, and this is why I didn't pull all of them off. So
Right. I see.
what's interesting, and it's the same with our cities and towns, right? That once you become a incorporated municipality, the state says, these are things you have to provide. And once you became a first-class city, these are things you have to provide. You have to provide public transit, you have to provide a hospital, you have to provide, here are all of the things. It's the same way for the county. These are the things they have to provide. So some of these departments have boards, like the fairgrounds has a board, the health department has a board, the airport has a board. Who else has boards on there?
Library.
The library, Parks and Rec, Planning and Zoning. So for every department and service, a lot of them have boards, right? Are there any of them on there that don't have boards? The assessor.
Yeah, the
The electeds don't. So your assessor, your clerk of district court, coroner, county attorney.
The importance of these boards is that it actually brings government closer to the people, because people that apply to these boards have a say in the actions that government performs. So that's the critical part of filling the boards with as many qualified people as we can, is because it actually gives more control to the community.
You guys remember, well, maybe not, when we talked about cities and counties, the number of departments that within cities, it's like 7, 9, maybe. County has 23. So which then, you think about, well, bar none is currently setting up a police department, right? They just hired their chief. But when you have a city or a town, first-class cities, most of them don't, but if you have an unincorporated, or you have one that this doesn't have the size to be able to provide, then they rely on the county. The county provides those services. So the county provides fire and police to bar none. And out in Alcova and
Not
law
Barnum.
enforcement.
Barnum has their own fire department.
Fire department, yeah, and they will have their own police department, yeah.
So the distinction there is actually pretty important. So cities are self-sufficient to an extent, but the county does a lot of the really heavy lifting. There's things that, the cities don't or can't individually do, like having a clerk's office, having the district courts. All the cities rely on these entities. They rely on the sheriff for a place for detention. And it's mutually beneficial though, because the cities, all people in Natrona County, they pay property taxes, and the county receives a portion of that. And just like the city receives their own portion of the property taxes, only to the city, the county receives a little bit larger portion, but from everybody. And so that service is, diffuse across the community, but it's the counties who do the real heavy lifting, and it's some of these things that the individual cities don't offer, like the library is one of these things, and
The airport.
the airport, the fairgrounds. So there is a distinction in them. The cities are extremely important because they're the urban centers that keep people here, and they offer amenities that the county doesn't necessarily offer. So the dynamic is key in that. It's important to really understand that.
Yeah, with the services that the county provides, like Casey said, every municipality relies on those. So while our Casper-Natrona County Health Department is in Casper, it services the entire county. That's a lot, it's a lot, which is crazy to me. Here's what gets crazy to me. You look at the amount of services, and we'll get to this part later, the amount of services, the heavy lifting the county has to do, and their budget is probably the 4th of the cities.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, just the overall operating budget is much smaller. So now we get to listen to Tracy.
Oh.
This is by statute, what the budget process looks like. So very similar to our cities and towns, right? Our cities and towns have to follow by statute. Here's the process you have to follow. Here's how you budget, when you budget, all of the things. So we have that uniformity throughout Wyoming. Our counties are the same way. And it's, Title 16, Chapter 4, that is all written for Tracy.
So I like to always say that the county clerk is recognized in 34 out of 42 statutes. So it's a I have my hands in a lot of pots. Some of them I don't want to be in, and sometimes being in part of the budget is not always fun. But I'm the chief budget officer for the county. I prepare the budget for the commissioners. All the requests are sent to me. I prepare them. I have to give them the request by May 15th is the statutory deadline that they have to get the request. And then we hold the meetings. We hold meetings. We talk with the department heads and the elected officials. They give the commissioners their requests. If there's any questions that need to be asked or answered, those are done during our budget sessions. We have to, when we're looking at our budget, I think as Dave explained, our budget, we have to balance our budget. It's called a balanced budget. So we can't budget more than what our expected revenues are for the next upcoming fiscal year. So we had to become creative this current budget. We have, as you all know, probably we have a new health department being built. So we had to look at ways to finish the completion of that project using some other funding sources that we have in order to get that project completed within the budget amount, and then also allowing us to budget and allocate funds for our mandated services, which are the elected services, which are the elected departments, what we refer to as mandated services. So not only do we have to, by statute, fund our services, then like Casey said, we are funding for all other types of projects, fire department, emergency management, sheriff, those type of funds, and we also give funds to other entities and other facilities, if you will, or agencies. We fund a lot of agencies. So our budget continues to grow, but we try to be very fiscally responsible, so that's partly my job. I'm the czar, I guess, the budget Nazi, if you will. So, but ultimately the board has the ultimate decision. So we work really hard as a group to get that taken care of. The budget has to be approved by the third Monday in July. That's a statutory deadline, so we have to meet that deadline, no exceptions.
And it is that specific, the third Monday in July.
Yeah, it's written like that. So I have to do publication notices. We have to post our approved budgets on the website. The approved budget has to go through a budget hearing on the third Monday, no later than the third Monday in July, and it's a public meeting. The budget is passed by a resolution, which the commissioners pass during their regular commissioner work session or work meetings in the evening. Anything else? I mean, as you can see, a maximum of 12 mills for the levy. We are at 12 mills. Oconee County are at 12 mills.
They cannot go above it. So, because that's dictated by state law, right? We set the maximum of 12. So when it comes to figuring out, what a mill is in terms of property tax, similar, I think, to what we talked about at the first session. So by statute, you take whatever the total value of a residential property is and multiply that times 9.5%, whatever your number you have, that is the taxable amount. That's the only amount you can tax, is 9.5% of the total value. And then you can go through and start applying mills and figuring out, but the county itself is capped at 12. It cannot go above that.
In our budget, we do have other revenue sources other than property tax. We have sales tax. My office, last fiscal, my office brought in $1.2 million. because I do the land recordings, I do marriage licenses, I issue vehicle titles. You know, so those, Jill has her revenue that she generates for the county, the sheriff's office has a little bit. Some departments obviously bring in more than others, like the treasurer's office brings in a huge amount of revenue because they do license plates and also sales tax, or, you know, sales tax and property tax, they collect all those funds. So all the entities or all the departments are generating a certain amount of revenue, some more than others. And we have other revenue sources, we get grants, the sheriff's office gets a lot of grants. We have interest monies that are available to us that we use as revenue sources as well. So it's just not property tax, that's not the only thing that funds our budget.
So with, and this is something I don't know, with the legislation that we just passed, giving municipalities the ability to invest in equities, because you didn't have that ability before, is that also
That's
something?
county too.
Yeah, so counties can, cities can, so you're not limited in
Right.
where you invest those funds. Okay, which is good, because for a long time, I mean, the state, you know, can take these, and a corpus of money and invest it in equities, you're gonna get a much better return than if you're just treasury bonds or something sometimes. But, so the state's been doing this for a very long time, but our counties and our cities and our towns were not allowed to. And so after a lot of work, I think, between our cities and counties, and like, this is not okay, we need to change this and give them the ability to also, you know, have a little more control over their revenue and some of that investment income.
And the one thing on the optional 1 cent sales tax, that's approved by the voters every 4 years. And so what happens, we have agencies and entities that will submit requests to the commissioners for projects, infrastructure, capital expenditures, fire trucks, sheriff's trucks, things like that. A lot of those big ticket items have been purchased through our continual approval of the 1 cent. I think it started in 78, Pat, was it?
74 to 76.
So in
Yeah.
the mid to late 70s, so the voters have approved this 1 cent from way back then, but it does really help with our operations and helps our entities and our departments achieve bigger and better things that we may not have been able to do without that tax. So, but it is approved or voted on by the voters every 4 years.
Which is coming up.
It is coming up.
One thing on the 1 cent is that the 1 cent actually facilitates a lot of operation of government right now.
You can just sit.
And what I mean by it facilitates the operation of government, like Tracy said, it, you know, fire trucks, police cars, and at times, you know, capital outlays for infrastructure do, you know, absorb some 1 cent funding. And so that all goes to, you know, keeping different costs down for the taxpayer. And it also keeps it so that, you know, budgets can balance. So while no one really wants to rely directly on 1 cent funding, it's right now it's incredibly important, especially as costs continue to increase, to have these, you know, have these pools of money that aren't directly paid for entirely by the local population. It's very highly funded by tourists and pass-through on the sales tax. And so, you know, that's our 5th cent. We have the 6th cent right now. It's doing the same thing. It's not entirely passed on to the, you know, residents of Casper or the residents of the county that are in Casper paying. There's a lot of pass-through dollars that are building those surpluses. It's just really important to understand that. And on the city side of things, when capital investments are made, using 1 cent funds to maybe, you know, help with grant matches or some of these other things, it actually helps keep rates low for water and sewer at times, because those infrastructure costs are incredibly high. And so when we can use these you know, pools of capital that have been essentially gifted to us to some extent by the taxpayers here, but also by pass-throughs, it does actually keep money in your pockets, because your water and sewer rates can stay lower. So that's not directly a county, you know, not directly applicable to county services, but it is to city services. And it's just, it's something that's often overlooked by residents that actually pay the taxes.
I think it's like 18%, maybe 18% of our total sales tax revenue is from people traveling through our cities and our towns and going shopping, going out to dinner, you know. Yeah, about 18% of our sales tax isn't us, the folks that live here. What's interesting too is this intergovernmental revenue. So that is funds that the state pays to the county and the feds pay to the county because we mandate certain services, which usually happens, but then there are times that the state says we're gonna mandate this and, figure it out. But there are some of those that, when I show you the pie chart in a minute, that's what those intergovernmental are. It's the feds and the states paying a portion or some of the things that we mandate.
And right along with that, one of the biggest boosts that we get in our budget is something called PILT, and that's pay in lieu of taxes. Because we have so much federal lands in our county, the state or the federal government actually pays us. This year it was I believe $4.6 million. That's a huge chunk of our budget. And so that really helps out as far as our road maintenance, doing different things, and just balancing our budget all the way across the board. And the biggest problem with that is that they vote on that annually. So it's not ever guaranteed.
It's at the federal level, federal level, they vote on that,
Yeah.
decide if they're going to continue
Yeah.
that distribution or not.
And a lot of times, they don't distribute that money until later on in the year, which makes it a little nerve-wracking for us when we're sitting back wondering, how much are we gonna get? Are we gonna get it all? And, when are we gonna get it? And so that is something that is a big deal that we get from our federal government. Fortunately, our representatives are very proactive about making sure that we get that funding from the federal government, so.
Look into PIL, it's fascinating. I think I have that on here somewhere.
What do you got?
Salt Creek oil field, if it goes away, does Natrona County go away or what? Or revenue?
I don't know how much
What kind of revenue does Salt
comes
Creek?
out of Salt Creek.
So Salt Creek does provide substantial amount of revenue. Not all of that revenue though comes to Natrona County. The minerals are,
The severance tax is gonna go to
yeah,
the state.
it's a severance tax to the state, and the state pays a portion back to the cities and counties. So it's not directly Natrona County receiving all those funds. If Salt Creek oil field were to go away, there would absolutely be a void as far as the mineral royalties that we would get from there. So to the extent, I don't know though. I know it is a major contributor and has been for many years.
I've always heard like 60%. I don't know if that's
Well, and that's one of the things we talked
Yeah.
about the very first session. I mean, just in terms of revenue, and how much we rely on our oil and gas. Yeah, you guys pay a lot of the revenue. Yeah,
One
it
of-
comes from you guys.
One important thing to remember with revenue, and when revenue does start decreasing for cities and counties is, there are mandated services, and so we'll still budget for those. But the difference is the level of service that the public receives. When you have less funding, your level of service decreases. And so what's enjoyed by, any number of the public will start to diminish. The service will still be there, but it may be harder to access, and it may not be as enjoyable as it is now. So we have to keep that in mind when we talk about, cuts to the budget or, things that we may or may not vote on.
And there are, even with the county, there's priorities, right? But by statute, it pretty clearly dictates, these are the things you have to, you are mandated. If you don't provide this service, you are breaking the law. So the ones that maybe, aren't mandated would go first, and then there are priorities, but, yeah, by law they have to. Maybe
Well,
just not.
And even right along with that, you know, it's what Casey said. Those mandated services, we can still have them, but maybe not at the same level. You know, right now, our sheriff deputies take their vehicles home, they don't have to share one. A few years ago, they actually had to share vehicles, and the cost associated with that goes up when you have to share vehicles with somebody else. That's just a statistical fact. Well, if we have to cut, you know, when you start looking at over $100,000 by the time you equip a truck with the radios, the lights, and everything else that's associated with it, those are items that may or may not be on the chopping block, because if you have to balance the budget, those are things that you have to look at. And so those services, if you don't have a deputy that's available because his truck's in the shop or something else, those are all things that we have to look at.
Which is interesting. I think that's one of the misconceptions at the city and at a county level, is people will complain about our police department. And why does every officer have their own car? They should just have to share a car. What's interesting though, when you start digging into the numbers, how much more that costs. I mean, in terms of fuel and maintenance, and I mean, it's one of those that is kind of counterintuitive. The fewer cars we have to share, the more expensive it tends to be.
And I will tell you that one cop, one car was a 1 cent project, so that was paid for by 1 cent optional sales tax.
It's interesting things. Okay, so this is 2024, and I think they kind of referenced where some of those funds came from. You'll see, yeah, the different taxes, intergovernmental charges for services. What's interesting though, and maybe have, I don't know, Tracy or one of you talk about the difference between the general fund, the construction fund, the non-major fund. What's the difference between those and how you access money?
Tracy, I'll let you do that.
Maybe that's a Tracy
You
question.
understand that stuff better than the rest of us.
I am not the treasurer, mind you, who handles the revenue.
Mm-mm.
But, so the general fund is just as it sounds. It's the general fund, it's our big pot of money, it's our big, checking account, basically. So that's where, when I was talking about the revenues that the departments generate, all of those revenues for the most part go into the general fund. And then we have a county road construction fund. Those are, some of those are restricted funds. They're from, gas taxes and those types of taxes. So some of those funds are restricted, so they can only be spent or expended on particular projects that fall under the purview of those restricted. We have non-restricted road funds as well, so they're not pinned down as hard, but they're also need to be used on roads. And let's see, investment income, basic, just what it sounds, you know, we all know we sold the hospital. Big hot topic. So we got a lot of money for that hospital, but we also are living or using the earned income or the earned interest off of that sale of that hospital. That hospital money, the corpus has not been touched. That was the intent when the hospital was sold, that corpus money was not to be touched. So we are able to help build that health department, the new health department, with the interest earnings off of the sale of that hospital.
So some of them, and like what Tracy just said, a percentage of the fuel tax that then goes into the county road construction fund, that's one of those it's dictated by statute. So when we set fuel tax, when we set sales and use tax, when we set the 5 cent optional 5 cent general operating fund, all of those collections and percentages and how it's distributed and how the funds are used, that's all dictated by state law. So they can't just tap into that money and say, well, yeah, but you know, people were traveling all over the place because we got a lot more money in fuel tax, so we're just gonna take it out of there and dump it in here. Legally, they can't. They can't.
And your licenses and permits, those are gonna be your building permits, those type of licenses. Some of those will be a liquor license fee that my office handles. What else would fall under licenses?
So our vehicles, our personal vehicles?
No, 'cause that's under
That's under the treasurer's
the
office.
treasurer's office.
So that would be, more charges for services or the intergovernmental. I'm not sure where they placed it, but not license plates would not fall under those license and fees. It's more building permits, that type of thing.
That's what, I mean, an interesting thing that a lot of people don't know, yeah, that even at a county level, they're very separated out. And you can't take money from this one and put it over here. They're pretty tight, pretty tight. There's your revenue. What's interesting, and this just comes, I mean, straight out of the county. What's interesting to me is if you look at the difference between 2023 and 2024, our population overall increased, right? But the revenue generated from the assessed value and the property tax levies and the value of our mill all went down. But we have more people. Why is that, Dave?
Well, to the best of my knowledge, which is very limited sometimes, and this is one area that is very limited, is housing values actually went down.
Which is a good thing.
And so your assessed values are gonna go down. And they're always a year behind. You know, when we came out of COVID and there were a lot of houses that were, I mean, there weren't any houses that were on the market. Everything was selling really quick. Everybody was getting the maximum amount for their property. Now, houses are on the market a lot longer, and so your property values actually go down because they're not selling for as much. The assessor, what they actually do is they actually collect information from an area that, an attribute, basically, and they compare what those property values sell for. And that's how they assess the value overall. So that's good on the one hand if you live in an area where the property values have all gone down and people sell their houses for substantially less from one year to the next. But if you live in one of those areas where there's one person that came in and spent a whole lot more money on a piece of property, that affects everybody, or it can affect everybody. And so it's kind of when you have somebody that comes in from out of state that comes in and pays cash and pays a lot more for a piece of property because it's still a bargain to them compared to where they came from, it affects all the rest of us. And so, but that situation, the actual value of the property actually dropped, and that wasn't just residential property, that was commercial too. Commercial properties right now are really difficult to move overall as a general. And so that's what those differences are, but that changes, and it all depends on what those evaluations are that come in to the assessor every year.
And
I know very little, I'm just learning on this topic, but I'm gonna touch it for my own understanding. And this question goes to Tracy and Commissioner Coates and to, and to the treasurer. I know Tracy is the chief budget officer. And the commissioners, I think I kind of understand, and the treasurer, I kind of understand now. So when you look at the overall budget, and if there's a revenue which is going to be changed from a legislature perspective, and the only reason I'm raising this question is because I attended last week the Department of Revenue meeting. And there's strong headwinds on the property tax. So my question is twofold. A, as commissioners, as chief budget officer, as treasurer, how much influence do you have, or discussions or collaborations you have with the legislators? That's my first question. My second question is, how much, if property tax has gone down, and if there's a push to go even farther, given the headwinds and the discussions which is taking place. And I also understand that in the state of Wyoming, we are not a referendum state like Colorado. Colorado is all driven, referendum means driven by vote. I just learned this last week. Versus here in Wyoming, we have the legislators, state, and the voters. Both together will make the final decision. So in that equation, how do you play that equation?
Well, here, if you don't vote correctly when you're in Cheyenne, you don't go back. That's the way it usually works. I mean, that's the easiest way to put it.
So, I guess to kind of step out of the light when, so I guess it's a complex answer. So I hear all the time that legislators represent their districts, and that's not, it's true, but it's not entirely true, because when you're elected, you are representing the entire state. Your decisions affect the entire state. So, it is what it is, but it's a cop-out to say you're only representing your district, because your decisions are big. And so, when we talk about changing revenue streams for cities, counties, towns, we have to figure out, okay, well, that public capital that is necessary to fund all the public services that we mandate or that we want, well, how are we gonna replace that public capital? And, what's that long-term outlook look like? So property tax, yes, it's an old style of tax. Yes, it's, it has some feudal roots, but it's one of the most stable forms of tax, and that's why it's persistent. And the services it provides are pretty substantial. As we've seen with the budget, it's not something that covers every aspect of county government. And if we were to say the mandated services can only work off of property taxes, it would be a pretty bleak picture for the services that we could provide. So, in answer to your question, interaction with the legislators is pretty important. We interact as much as we can with our legislators, and so does our county commissioner association. So individually, we have conversations. The commissioner association has conversations. They even they do lobby the legislature on our behalf or on behalf of what's collectively good for the state as viewed by the county commissioners themselves, because we vote on topics as a majority to see what we want to support, what in our view as government leaders, what we think is going to be good for the our counties, and if that's good in general for the state. So how effective that interaction is it really depends on the individuals that are brought to bear on the legislature. So, and if the people that are in the legislature feel that they are voting to protect the economic interests of the public, their public or the public at large, or if they want to vote along whatever ideological line that they feel like that day. So it's very complex. So I don't know if I confused you more or if I helped.
I sense that, yeah.
Well, and that's one of those things that we've talked about, right?
Yeah.
When we're electing, whether it's at a school board, city, city council, county commissioners, all of your county electeds, your state electeds, really knowing who the people are and how engaged they are in the community and how well, they have working relationships, because it really is important to know how engaged and familiar are you with your community and the state and how it operates.
And right along with that, I know this last year, the conversations that I had with almost all of our legislators, they would call and ask, okay, if we do this, how is that going
What
to
does that
affect
look
you?
like?
And that's something that, this was on a regular basis. I'd have 3 or 4 calls a day And I would say, if I didn't have the answer, I'd get back to them. And I tried to give them the very best information, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think most of the information I gave you was pretty spot on.
Really good. I mean, there were times, not only, I'll share a couple of stories. So I'm standing, I've gone back to the rental house, and I'm standing on the step in the cold, and it's snowing, and I'm on the phone with Dave at 10:30 going, I know this is what's coming up tomorrow. And I know, how's this gonna hit, what this is gonna go. And so there were a lot of late nights that he got calls from me. And then in addition, when I'm sitting on the floor of the house, I'm texting Dave.
Yeah. How much is this gonna cost? What are we gonna be able to do?
What is this gonna look like? Cause then I can get up on the floor and say, as a representative of Natrona County, I can tell you, this is what it's gonna do. This is how it's gonna hit our county, this is how it's gonna hit our city, this is how it's gonna hit our school district. Because instantly I'm
Yeah.
texting people, getting numbers.
And I really think the most important part of that is building that relationship with our legislators and giving them accurate information. What they're asking about may not be something that we agree with or disagree with, but when they ask for something specific, that's the information we need to give them so they know exactly what it is. The special districts were one of the things that I know several of them were fighting very hard to make sure that the special districts didn't get hit. And, everything was backfilled coming out of the House, and then the Senate killed it all. And so those are the kind of conversations that we have. But bottom line is, we don't know how it's going to affect us a lot of times until a month or two afterwards, because everybody's still trying to put all the numbers together. And then that's the reason why Tracy and I spent a lot of time going through the different numbers this year, because we were trying to figure out just exactly where it was gonna hit, how it was gonna hit, and how we were going to be able to adjust and bring that forward in the budget request. And so that's really what it comes down to. I mean, as far as the way I look at it is that you're gonna have fluctuating budgets. There's no way around that. You're gonna have fluctuating income. But trying to find out what that number is far enough in advance so that you can pass that on to everybody else, all those departments that you looked at that rely on the county, and saying, okay, what can you do? And we had some bad information this year at the last minute saying that we were fine, and then we found out that no, we weren't fine. And so we were doing this roller coaster thing, and the numbers we originally had come up with were right on the money, but fortunately we had enough carryover from items that weren't used last year that it covered the majority of that. But that was, Casey knows, we were all sharpening our pencils, looking at how we were going to adjust things, and the numbers that we originally had were we didn't know how much the carryover was gonna be, but.
Well, I think that's part of the challenge that we ran into this year, just passing additional legislation, because the state had already put in place a 4% cap. So the increase in valuation cannot exceed 4% year over year. We had already put that in place, but because there's that delay, that hadn't hit yet. And we put in the long-term homeowners exemption and the veterans exemption, and is there another one?
25%.
And the 20, and then, but we had those other exemptions already in place. So the county is already figuring out how many long-term home buyers and how many veterans and how many, so they're already working with those numbers, which is affecting things. And then the state comes back and says, oh, by the way, we're gonna add another 25%.
Yeah, and this year, generally speaking, not always, but generally speaking, with a revenue item like that, they give us a little bit of time to figure it out. The 25% did not work that way because it went into effect immediately this year.
Yep.
The long-term homeowner had been passed previously, but it went into effect this year. And so, you get that staggered effect, but when you have have something that comes out of Cheyenne, and we're trying to scramble to figure out just exactly how that's going to affect us and where it's gonna go, you know, in that year, and add everything else up. The revenue is a challenge. I mean, there is no two ways about that. Looking at it, and we spent a lot of time going through it and trying to make sure that we knew what we were gonna do. And, you know, none of us like to make cuts, but we were looking at it, and my understanding is next year is gonna be
Hopefully not,
even more of a challenge than this year.
hopefully not.
To
But
jump
that's
on
one of
that.
the things, oh, sorry. Casey.
I was just saying, just jumping onto that, it's, you know, this year, you know, we were lucky because we had bridge funds. And so those are incredibly vital. But, you know, those bridge funds, you know, may be expended, you know, during this budget year. And so, you know, when you do a tax adjustment in 1 year, it may not affect, you know, the governmental unit in that particular year. It may take, you know, 2 years, it may take 3 years, it may take 5 years, but eventually it will hit that unit, and, you know, they will have to make some changes. But in that time, if more changes occur, it's kind of a cascading effect. So, you know, as things change, you know, it's not the more they stay the same, it's really the more that they change and the more dynamic that your electeds have to be, and the more, I guess, creative in their budgets they have to be if we want to be able to sustain a quality of life that is expected at the current level.
Well, and what's interesting too is, as we talked about, right, the counties are extensions of state government. They are the executive branch. So, as we talked about, right, the legislative makes the laws. We say, here are the laws. We hand it off to the executive branch and say, good luck with that. Because you get to enforce it.
Yeah.
You get to make sure that this is carried out at every county level, which is exactly how that conversation went, right? Because then it was, we made the decision and then said, good luck with that. And then the counties and the city said, now we're the bad guy, because we get to tell everybody we're reducing budgets, we're reducing services, we're the bad guy, because we're the ones that said, enforce that. Which is where it gets really interesting, just in terms of how things work, and I think the accountability we need to take at a state level, right? So I tell these guys all day long, anytime you're in public, you can throw me under the bus, yes. Throw me under the bus all day long. What's interesting though, because you were talking about some of the property tax, this is the total, right, revenue. So that 25% cut for now is just residential. That didn't affect ag, it didn't affect industrial, it didn't affect commercial. But half of the property tax revenue is residential for Natrona County. It's not that way in other counties, but because they might have more commercial, more ag, more industrial, more whatever, you know, mineral. So some of that, yeah, as far as the commercial and mineral, is kind of what you were talking about when you get up there.
Yeah.
But half of Natrona County is residential.
So
So
bottom line,
that
that
doesn't hit.
25%, we heard last week about how much the city lost, how much did the county lose?
About 2.3 million.
Which is
It-
crazy,
it
when
was
we get to
about-
their
it was-
budget, yeah.
It was about 6%, between 6 and 7% of our total property tax revenue.
Because here's what's crazy, so remember we talked about the city of Casper, I mean, their budget for 26 is 190 some million, right? The 26 budget for the county, not the treasurer, not the assessor, just is 64 million.
Well, and that includes encumbered funds. The real number is the 52.
The 52.
Hey, that's really what it amounts to. So you start taking, you know, we took 2 million off that.
Yeah,
And
because
of revenue, we
the
didn't have.
16%, the Lake County Road Fund and the restricted lake funds, you can't use those. Yeah, it's part of the budget, but it's not part of your general fund.
And the other thing, when Casey was alluding or saying, you know, to bridge the gap or the money that we had to make up for that deficit or for the decline in revenue that we're anticipating is because of being fiscally responsible in previous years. So, you know, we don't expend all of our money. We have a $52 million budget, but that doesn't mean we go out and spend it all. So we have carryover money, previous money that hasn't been expended from previous fiscal years. So, you know, when we start saying we're gonna reduce the budgets or we're gonna have budget cuts, but then, well, you have tons of money, you sold the hospital, you have multi-millions of dollars. Well, that's not, you know, you don't spend everything you have or you make. So you, when you're electing folks or when you have the commission or the clerks or whatever, I mean, we're trying to be fiscally responsible with your money as well.
We're gonna put some away, so when things go off the rails, we can. But if you look at, and I don't know, yeah, who would like to, this one's pretty straight up though. Very similar though, when you compare like the county expenditure to city and town, right? The biggest chunk of that, law and order. That's a big chunk of their budget, right? The library's little, health and human services is little.
Well, yeah, the enforcement, law enforcement is about 45% of our budget, if I remember correctly. It's not 30, it's higher than that, because there's other things that are tied into that as far as the detention center, fees that we have to pay outside, you know, for different types of services and everything else, so it's actually higher than what that number is.
But in this graph, the law and order, so the contracts and services do include like juvenile detention services, the payment that we have to pay to house the juveniles and that contract we have with them, some other misdemeanor services, that type of thing. So that is separated, so it isn't reflective in the law and order.
Why are health and human services just 1%?
Health and Human Services it's the health department, and which is a very small amount of our budget. I think we approved $735,000 to the health department this year, so it's a very small amount. And also our community action partnership is in that category.
Is that adequate?
Well, if you ask them, probably not.
But they also, I mean, our public health gets funding from other sources too, so the city of Casper kicks
Okay.
in,
Yeah.
Mills kicks in,
Okay.
Evansville kicks in, Barnum kicks, I mean,
But
Lattimore,
adequacy is a,
they kick in too.
I mean, adequacy is all a matter of perspective.
Subjective.
Yes, yeah, subjective, and the thing is when we talk about health and human services, the county, you know, what the county's providing there with the community action partnership is, that's a group that, you know, helps facilitate, you know, services to disenfranchised individuals. So, you know, they help with the ever popular, you know, homeless population discussions. You know, they're actually very impactful there, and they bring a lot of added value. That the $80,000 that we may give them $80,000, but there's a return on investment there that the public doesn't see, because, you know, the community action partnership may be a helping hand for someone in need, and it can offset costs that we aren't seeing now, but we will in 5 years. You know, and those costs would be indigent care, because right now, you know,
You got
better health
urgent care, the
picks these
ER.
things up, so, but they're absorbing some of these costs and keeping some of these costs down. And, you know, so they're keeping a lot of other social costs down that the county would otherwise absorb. So it's a 1%,
The overall
we get a lot of
counties.
value for it right now, but, you know, those are things that, you know, are looked at, you know, traditionally on, you know, are these things that we will have to cut if we start, you know, running into, you know, budget problems. So, you know, 1%, it's not a lot, but what we get for it is, it's pretty impressive.
Okay.
Yep.
You know, another one on there that's like that is the county fair. They actually bring in a lot of revenue, so it's just what they're representing there is what percentage of our general fund budget is. It's not necessarily what they're bringing in as well.
And one final aspect on this, where Parks says 1%, parks are big for the tourism industry. And so it's a 1% that we spend on our parks, but our parks bring in lots of people. And it contributes to gas tax, it contributes to, what do you wanna call it, the lodging tax and sales tax. So, you know, it's 1%, but again, there's a return on investment there. And, you know, but again, parks, even though there's some restrictions on the parks funds, but parks is another area that, you know, a lot of times when you get in budget constraints, you know, parks are areas that are looked at for reduction. And so we look at the effect there, we reduce parks budgets, we reduce our marketability in the tourism aspect, so all interconnected.
And if you look on here, you have two different things, you have parks, and then you have the lake fund. They're totally isolated, because lakes are all that funding has to be generated and spent
There.
out at the lakes, because that's an agreement with the Bureau of Reclamation. Whereas the parks, stuff up on Casper Mountain, Hell's Half Acre, any of our other parks that we have around the county, that's at 1%.
It's not easy.
I have two
It's not
questions.
easy.
One
Yes.
is on the county road fund. Is there any trickle down from the federal in terms of grants or anything which comes to the state and then it goes into the county? That's the first question. My second question is, has law and order always been the bigger chunk of the appropriation?
I think in the state, the county, and the city, it
Yes,
is the
you'll-
biggest chunk.
You'll see on, you know, law enforcement is traditionally one of the largest expenditures. You know, here we don't have, you know, fire service. Well, fire services are expensive as well, but they're incredibly necessary. So, you know, we run into the, you know, the question of is, you know, you know, relative, you know, peace and security important? You know, obviously it is. And, you know, yes, there's trickle down from events for our roads, but roads are also an area that the county commissioners are charged with maintenance. So, you know, to some extent, those two are a mandated service that we have to maintain the county roads.
So at the state level, right, we have our highway patrol, our troopers. That's a big, yeah, that's big. So it's interesting when I hear there will be conversations, you know, either in other states about, you know, defunding police and not paying for law and order, and it's like, oh, okay, I'm not sure how that's gonna work for you. It's an interesting conversation. At a state level in Wyoming, I think a year, maybe 2 years ago, the conversation was, we don't need, you know, city law enforcement. We'll just get rid of those and just hand it off to our counties. So do you understand what our counties do? And then it was, well, maybe we'll let the counties, or no, we'll let the cities keep theirs, but then we'll get rid of the counties and just roll the counties into the state. We'll just make them troopers. I was like, do you know what our sheriffs do and what they have to deal with? There's no way there's no way. Because it is such a big part of, I mean, every level. To eliminate one level and rely on the other, I think would throw everything, it would not be good.
There's
Would not
also
be good.
distinctions between what sheriff's offices do and what municipal police departments do and what highway
And
patrols
the
do.
troopers can do, yeah.
And, you know, the sheriff's office, again, they have, to some extent, a heavier lift than the police department does because of the diffuse services. Detention, civil processes, you know, and then patrol. And then, you know, any number of specialty things that they do, where, you know, municipal police departments, you know, they have specialty services they provide, and they're no less important, but it's a different animal entirely. And, you know, I'm sure everyone has maybe seen the, you know, news article recently about funding streams and police departments. You know, in Shoshone, there's a big controversy over the fact that, you know, a certain amount of tickets have been written and so much money has gone to the general fund. That doesn't work that way in counties.
It doesn't,
So
it doesn't.
counties don't fund themselves through the issuance of speeding tickets or any of those things. So it's a very different dynamic. Cities have that ability.
Yeah, and what's interesting, and this is one of the other things I didn't realize, you think about, like within the city of Casper, you call 911, fire, PD, I mean, they all show up, right? Because they have different things that they're trained and specialized in. So fire is typically on site first is for EMS, right? I'm gonna look to Dave for most of this because he's my fire contact too. But you'll have fire and PD and they all show up because they have, you know, different functions. Kick that up to a county level, well, our sheriff now is typically the only one. So he has to be trained and certified in all of those things. And our state troopers even more so, because it doesn't matter what the incident is, they have to be trained and equipped to handle it by themselves, because they're the only ones out there. So talk to one of our troopers about the training and the certifications they have to go through. I mean, it is fire, it is ambulance, it is all of it, because they're the only ones out there. That's just them. So it's crazy, the more isolated you become, the more specialized and trained you have to be.
This is a question more for Commissioner North and Coates. One thing I picked up last week was within the state of Wyoming, there are 14 data centers. 11 of them are in Cheyenne and the remaining 4 are distributed. One is in Casper. And there's a misnomer within the general public that when you build data centers, they take a lot of energy, which is not true, because when you look at new data centers being built, they're going to have their own Edison built into with the data center construction. What do I mean by that? They'll be generating their own electricity. And the plan is always with new data centers being built under the federal direction that they will do 10 times more than what they need, and they'll put it to the open market, sell it to the open market. So there's a benefit there. However, my question is this. Any reason why there's only one data center in Casper? Is the Chamber of Commerce anything driving that? There is 2 underlying things I have behind it. One is, we are the energy capital. So we can have sustained revenue if you become part of a data center and help them in building their Edison.
So the short answer to that is, what is the incentive for a data center to come to Casper and Natrona County? It's an economic development question, and it's one that has a lot of social layers to it. So when new ventures like a data center wants to move here, one, we have to have a workable population for it. We have to have infrastructure for it, and and land. And while all of those things may not be available, though, it's no secret right now that there is some form of diversification that wants to move into Natrona County, and it's meeting a certain level of resistance. I'm not going to say it's right or wrong. It's just there. And so those are things that are also viewed outside of Natrona County by other development entities that could come in and help develop. And so sometimes public attitude hampers development, but also it can also be a matter of the just general economic climate in the state. Wyoming does pretty well. We have a surplus fund within our state, and so there's the opportunity there. It just really depends on if there's any real marketability for that company in particular. So we have some indirect control over that through our planning and zoning and our ability to facilitate development. Cities do as well, but at the end of the day, it's an interplay between development and government and the public that drives that.
And part of that too is location. Cheyenne pulls a lot of people out of Front Range, Colorado. There's a lot of, that's basically what it amounts to, is that people like to be able to go down into Colorado because of the things that they want to do, whether it's shopping or whatever else. There's opportunity there that comes with a major metropolitan area. also disadvantages about living in a major metropolitan area. That's the reason why we live in Wyoming. I can tell you that in the time that I've been on the commission, we have not had anything come through for a data center through the county. There has not been a single thing. There hasn't even been any discussion of it, to the best of my knowledge. At least I haven't been involved in it.
So I'd follow up with that and don't disagree at all, but one of the major differences is, yes, the new data centers are talking about self-generated, which will take a change in state statute to allow them, and that was in front of minerals, I think was a couple of weeks ago. And I hope they do it, and hope the legislature changes that, but we are served by Rocky Mountain Power. Cheyenne is served by
That's-
Black Hills Energy.
And that's where I was gonna go next. That's exactly where I was gonna go next, is because
Utility.
Rocky Mountain Power, we have one project that has been in the works, and it was actually approved before I even got on the commission. And it still has not come to fruition. Part of the reason why it hasn't is because Rocky Mountain Power wants so much money for the transmission lines and to be able to tie into it. The amount of money that they want for that is as much as the entire project would cost.
Yeah.
So that right there, as far as having a surplus and selling it, is not beneficial. Because if you can't get rid of your product, your excess, when I was working on the Amoco refinery doing the reclamation work down there, we were looking at putting up some wind turbines at that time on some of the property that they had. Until we found out how much Rocky Mountain Power was going to not pay us, which is the easiest way to put it, to put that money back into the system. There would have been a huge expenditure out, but not anything back in. The amount that they would pay for that additional funding or that additional power is not what they're charging us. There's a huge difference. There's a huge gap in there. And so I think that, as far as the surplus goes, I think that takes that out of the equation completely. If they're self-generating and they're supplying the energy that they need right there, on their own property, and that's the way some of these data centers are going in down in Cheyenne, where they have a combination of solar and natural gas, so that they're guaranteed that they're gonna have that supply of energy that they have to have. That's a little different, but that's what they're doing. They're actually building their own systems and tying it all together to supply just that operation. That makes a big difference in how that is. And unfortunately, our climate is not always the most conducive to some of those types of energy.
Plus, about 5 years ago, I would say we changed some legislation where the power companies could contract, do a direct negotiation with those mega data centers that needed all that power, that they had to guarantee, the power companies had to guarantee that it would not affect we the consumers,
Right.
small residential.
And basically, it's like here, our power comes out of Dave Johnson, so that would mean new transmission lines here to supply that energy, because the current ones, I'm not gonna say they're capped out, but they're pretty close. They really are, and a lot of them have not been updated for a very, very long time. And, we look at all our transmission lines, they're all going out of state. They're all going somewhere else. And they're not coming here, and so they're sending that power to somewhere that's gonna pay more for it. So,
There's a couple of different reasons why Cheyenne's getting all of that. Plus, my understanding is they have the actual superhighway,
They have
fiber
access,
optics
yeah.
Yeah.
going along underneath. But
So there's a lot of, there's no easy answer to any of these things. One of the things I wanna point out, I don't think put out, I kind of did, the city's budget looks very different, than the county's. What's interesting, and I'm gonna pick on these guys right here, because our clerk of district court gets $2 million of that budget, for what?
So, all of my funding is mandated. I mean, all of my expenses are mandated,
All
so.
of the services are mandated.
Yes, services are mandated, so that pays for the jury trials, court-appointed attorneys, public defender.
That's one of the mandated
Yep.
by the state
Yep.
that we don't pay for.
Yeah, so when, this is great discussion, because when we talk about cutting the revenue streams, these are the services we're talking about for. And my budget has the court budget, and then of course for my office, because I am a county elected, I, do not work, I'm part of the judicial branch, but I do not work under the Supreme Court. I am the People's Court. And, so those fundings would just, that'd be very bad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is interesting, because that's one of those, as you look through, our county budget, it's things like that, right? That the state mandates, this is the service you have to provide, but we're not going to pay for it. We'll leave that up to the county to figure out.
And if you think about it, for the judicial system, if you don't want those things stopping, I mean, that would stop all of your
district courts.
cases and all of the services the court provides for the people, so. Yeah.
Yep. So most of these though, I mean, they really are.
And well,
But
last
they're
year,
mandated to provide.
I was just gonna say too, last year we had 68,000 people come through the Townsend Justice Center. I mean, that's a lot of people coming in for services. So, it's a big deal.
So those are our countywide services. You can see kind of how it shakes out. And some of those, to the question earlier, some of those like the health department, yeah, they get funding from others. They don't rely strictly on the county.
But, yeah, but some of us don't. We just strictly
Yeah.
kind of county funding.
That's true, absolutely 100%. But a much easier budget, well, not easier, but a little more simplified. We talked about this one little bit in terms of how much control we have over the county. Interesting though, because I was wrong, and Dave learned me this today. Because I said, yeah, home rule really doesn't apply to counties. Because you're an extension of the state, and he said, oh no, it does.
Home rule does apply, but what we have to do is we have to adopt the county's, or the state statutes, or their codes, before we can adjust anything. Prime example of that is building codes. If we don't adopt the building codes that the state has adopted, then we cannot control our own. We don't have any of that authority. When we do adopt them, then we have some regulations that we can change and make things easier and make it better
To
for
make
people.
it unique to
Yeah,
Michigan.
and so that is one difference. Fire code's the same way. By adopting the state fire code that's been passed, that gives us the opportunity to look at some of it and say, no, this doesn't work. And we can look at that and change that and adopt those regulations as amended, but we have to go through and we have to adopt those codes first.
I didn't know that. I didn't know we could have home rule.
Yeah, and then another example of that is the health department. If we don't have our own health department, then we fall under what the state requirements are. So if you've got a septic system or something like that, if we don't have a county health department that goes out there and takes care of that side of things, the state is the one that's responsible for doing it. And so we do have home rule. There are some things that we do that we can work within the system. So.
I learned a new thing today. So this is how, in terms of how because one of the things I said with our Board of County Commissioners, because they are the executive branch, right? The cities, they have a legislature, their city councils, right, to make ordinances, to make laws. We have legislative capabilities at the state level, but our county commissioners, our executive branch, they are also legislative branch, both, because there are laws that you get to make. So what does that look like? Because you are an extension of the state.
Don't really make them all, so.
I mean, it's kind of
to
what
an
you
extent.
just talked about though.
Yeah.
Yeah, where you have some of that flexibility in terms of
To-
regulations.
To an extent, there is a legislative aspect, and we utilize it from time to time. Recently, we passed a county road resolution. That's a legislative function that has executive ties to it. And so when we do these, it's we find a need in the community at large. And with regard to the road issue, we had a gravel pit issue, and then we have other issues on county roads where people will call us and voice particular concerns about truck traffic and whatnot. And so what we do is we, put time, energy, effort, research, and county services such as our county attorney's office and our road and bridge, all together, we come up with a product that we feel is going to best serve the county. That goes out to publication, it has a 45-day window, when public comment can be basically considered for that. We can make any alterations at that time based on public comment. And then we vote to affirm that resolution, and once that resolution is affirmed, it becomes something that's actionable on behalf of the executive in the county. So that's the legislative function that we serve, is the,
Has
adoption of resolutions. And the Board of Equalization is somewhat of a judicial function. So we actually kind of occupy all three branches, whether we like it or not.
You do. Which is where it gets tricky, because with the Board of Equalization, that they really aren't a judicial function, right? They are there to serve as a judge. And as a judge, you have to be impartial. You can't say, oh, your evidence is good or it's bad, or you should have given me this. They are judicial, which creates a challenge for them, because it puts them, as the Board of Equalization, in that judiciary role where they just have to listen to what is presented. And it's,
And one thing about it,
This is a bind.
when we do have a resolution or something like that, or change in zoning or things like that, we have to have public hearing. And we have to follow the state statutes on how to conduct that public hearing. We have to give everybody the opportunity to come up and speak. We have to take written comments, public comments, all into consideration with our decision. And it's like with zoning, when we have something, a project come before us, we have to look at not only what our regulations are, but we have to look at, did they follow all those regulations to get to the process they were at? And honestly speaking, if they did everything they were supposed to, then we have to affirm it. If they don't, and they left something out, then there's a different story. So we can't just get up there and say, well, we don't like it, so we're not gonna approve it. Or at least we shouldn't.
If we don't, we get sued.
Yeah.
So,
You do.
Yeah.
we have to play by the rules that we establish.
right, otherwise you get sued.
That's why I say we shouldn't, because it's you've got 5 different personalities on the board, and none of us have any control over the other 5. And so, a lot of
You can
times.
identify.
Yeah, so a lot of times we don't know how things are gonna happen until they happen. There's a lot of conversations that we have during that discussion period before we vote. And sometimes there's items that are brought up that we didn't think about or we weren't aware of. And sometimes we're the ones that bring up those items that others need to consider. And so it's not quite as cut and dry as as it appears sometimes.
But it's interesting, and they've talked about all these, I mean, in terms of resolutions, but the statutes are pretty clear, right? You can pass resolutions when it comes to managing county business and property. That's it. You can, when it comes to planning and zoning, when it comes to working with other entities, right? Getting into contract with the city of Mills and the city of Casper and entering into contract. Emergency medical services or roads. Pretty clear, here are the things that you get to decide, yeah, what those regulations and laws look like. Do you ever wander outside of those titles? Not really. Pretty much falls within all of
We're
those.
regulated pretty closely
Heavily
by state
regulated.
statutes.
Yep.
Sort of what we can do.
So most of those titles, I mean, 16, 18, 24 are pretty specific to counties, what they can and cannot do. So our municipalities have a little more autonomy than our counties do. So here's the big question, right? And then we'll turn it over if they want to answer a few questions. Pay attention, I mean, at the county level, this is how you get involved. So their regular meetings are the first and third Tuesdays. First and third of every month at 2:30 in the afternoon. So you could go to a county commission meeting and then just pop over and get a city council, if you wanted to. But here's what is also cool, the access you have in terms of frustrations, challenges, things you want to bring before. They are as accessible and open to the public as our city is. So I don't know which one of you, wants to talk through. The request is a little bit different in terms of those bigger issues.
You know, the one thing on here, you know, our meetings start at 2:30, but we have it segmented out because even though our afternoon sessions start at 2:30, that's where we bring people in to discuss a lot of things, and we don't take, I mean, we do take action because we can, but if we're gonna have a hearing on something, it will start at 5:30. So that way the public has an opportunity to get off work, come in and actually testify for something. It's not something in the afternoon. And all of our commission meetings are all on YouTube. So if you can't be there and you wanna watch it, you can see if we said anything we shouldn't have said.
But where the city will separate, they'll alternate weeks. They have a work session and a regular session, a work session and a regular session. For these guys, that's all on Tuesday. So it's the work session into the regular session. So
Yeah.
I try to get a hold of some of these guys on Tuesdays. They're like, I'm in meetings from 8 o'clock in the morning until 8 o'clock at night.
The work session is important to pay attention to because there's a lot of topics that get discussed at the work session that will later come to something we may vote on. There's a lot of conversations that begin there. They don't necessarily always come to a consensus or an answer there, but that's where the public can really get informed about what the commission is working on, what the requests are in front of us, because there's a lot of discussion that happens during these times, a lot of fact-finding missions. So I would say those are some really key ones to be in on. If you wanna come and, let the commission know of an issue, if you wanna come make a statement, if you just wanna come there and throw stones at us, feel free, that's public comments for it, so, you're all welcome, and we will take it smiling.
What are you guys, like, what was on your list this last week? What was on
So this last week,
Tuesday?
we had, one of the primary things will be coming back up this coming Tuesday, I believe, I think it's confirmed, is the Summit Medical Center asking for the issuance of revenue bonds. So that's a topic we will take back up in discussion, probably working toward a decision whether we want to engage in that or not.
Yeah, that's a big.
That's the big one?
That's a big thing. We have a lot of things coming up, over the next couple of months. One of the things that we've got coming back up soon is, we hired a new planner this year, and we're going back through the zoning. The zoning resolution that was passed in December of
2022 was filled with inconsistencies and things that needed to be addressed. And so we're actually gonna be bringing that forward. The commissioners have till in September to get all of our comments in on that. After that, those will be incorporated, and then we'll go on to the planning and zoning. Then we have the time constraints that we have to wait before it can come before the commission to be approved. So that is something that's big that, we need to get fixed.
Planning and zoning affects a lot, and it's one of those, it's something we wanted to tackle this year. It's our timeline, though delayed by turnovers, we are moving toward that. It's going to be a document that I think corrects a lot of the problems that have been brought up by the public at large, and some developers and more direct users of the planning and zoning. So we'll get that ironed out and move on to the next controversial issue.
Yeah. And there's a lot of stuff that, government is one of those, and it doesn't matter which government branch you're in. Things change on such a radical basis sometimes that things are brought to your attention. The road resolution was a prime example of that. And it wasn't just one road. We had 26 roads that were identified in that resolution. But a lot of things, when things happen, they bring that to the forefront, and it's like, oh, we need to look at this. And not just in this one place, we need to look at the whole county to make everything better. The same thing happened, with the zoning. There were some things some projects that came up that Casey and I worked pretty close on. And it's like, we don't have anything in zoning on this. We don't have anything in there that tells us that we have to do that. Everybody wants us to do that. But bottom line is, we don't have the authority to do that. And so it's just cleaning up some of the things and making it more consistent. And other counties do things that we want to incorporate into this zoning that will actually make it better, not only for the county, it'll make it better for our planners, and it'll also make it better for our citizens. And it's just a clarity. It's more of a consistency across the board by starting out at a different point and moving from there.
So there you go. If you would, please, Jill and Tracy and Dave and Casey, just a lot of appreciation for them. Because, when you work all day to serve 80,000 people and then someone calls and says, hey, how would you like to volunteer 2 hours of your time?
I say yes.
They say yes, and they show up. So really cool. And hopefully, it helps provide additional understanding of our county and how they operate and the things that they are mandated to do as an extension of the state. We pass all the laws and saying, here's how we're gonna take care of our people, and then we hand it off to 23 counties and say, figure it out, make it happen. And these are the guys that make it do it, so they really are pretty incredible people.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You guys are awesome, and then we're done. So next week, you get to hear all about the state.